I uh, I feel that above anything else in fantasy football, trades is the gateway to that connection and making new friends in that community itself, because that's where that conversation happens. Which is also why I get frustrated when people don't respond at all to trades, because I'm half the reason I'm interested in trading is to start the conversation and just connect, and that's why I play fantasy football. We are back with another week of Live Good Dynasty. I'm Arlen, this is Nate, and today I am excited about this episode because we're talking about some stuff that is going to be living on past this week. A lot of times when you record stuff in fantasy football, you no longer have any relevance. That content doesn't have relevance a week later if you don't catch it in the right time. A little different in the off season, but especially this one. We have we've mentioned before how we wanted to start this podcast to be able to have some conversations that we weren't hearing as much, or at least as deep into these conversations. So this episode is all about that, the intro to some of those conversations. One, like talking trades, we're going to go through all aspects of trades, not necessarily the trades themselves, but how do we approach them? What are our views on things like vetoes and stuff like that? And then we're going to talk about some positional approach. How do we look at each position within Dynasty, and how does that compare to when we're not in a Dynasty format? What's different there? But I'll hand it over to Nate. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Super excited to get into this because this is something that is long on my heart, knowing how we've operated together for the last 5 years and how we rock and roll with trades, and then how other people have reacted to us in our trading efforts. So, love
Yeah,
to
we've
actually give a peek behind the curtain a little bit as we rock and roll with strategy. So, let's talk trades. All right, man. So, we're going to be relentlessly honest here about a few things. I want to jump into what our style is and maybe even have a little bit of fun with some of the styles that we've seen out there in the world while we've interacted in the fantasy football arena for a while now. There's all kinds of different traders that we've seen. Also, how we treat picks in trades. So, how do we look at picks? How do we utilize them within a trade scenarios, depending on the time of year? You talk a lot about seasonality, so I want to dig into that a little bit. We'll talk about rules of engagement, and then we got two topics that I think are super hot button in this particular area. One, how and when should you use trade calculators? And then you and I are a part of kind of a commissioner committee in our Dynasty League.
Mhm.
And we have this veto button that I don't recall us ever having to use, but when would we use it and how would that go? So let's start at the top. Let's think about what our approach and our style is when it comes to trade. So you, sir, are one of the most unique traders that I've ever interacted with. So I would love to hear a little bit about what you have to share around your approach and style to trading.
Yeah. I trade quite a bit in fantasy football. I think one of our league mates called me Genghis Khan, because if you look at the in sleeper, the history of almost any player within our dynasty, you can trace it back to to me. So I like to move through players. I look at like those. I forgot what channel did it, but there's that show where you take like a, I don't know, a quarter or something, or you take a little bit of like a Nerf gun bullet, something random, and you move it up and you trade and you trade and you trade and you end up with a brand new car. And that's kind of my approach to trades, where I'm willing to myself pay a little bit more than value if I have a belief in somebody, or if I am taking a risk on what I think might happen next, but might sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. But if you hit on those little gains enough, it can bring these group of players up a little bit. So that's my general approach to trades, and I like to try to get out a little bit earlier than most people like to get out of a player while there's still value. I don't want to find out that my feeling is right. I want to, while that person's on my team, I want to get them out, and then that causes some trades, like trading away Josh Jacobs for James Robinson 2 years ago, right before he broke off for pretty great season. So I win some, I lose some.
I think career season is the terminology you were shooting there. Shooting
Yeah.
for. Yeah, absolutely. And that it's interesting because just purely on a volume piece, you've told me in the past when you have you're being active in your trade world, you at any given time will have 10 trades sitting in your queue of trying to execute. How do you manage that?
One, I will say this. I think that there needs to be some changes in the systems themselves. If Sleeper could, this this is my pitch for Sleeper. Sleeper, if you're listening, slash, I'm going to send this to you. But I would love to be able to group players. So how often do you send a trade that's like, I would take this player, I want this player, and you can have this player or any of these three. Now I have to trade all of these like three, four trades to you. I have to send all those to you in different versions and combinations as you get more players within that trade. Now I would love to be able to group some in to little chunks so that that other person can choose which one, and
Mm,
it moves some of these trades along a little bit. So if you could group, like, I'm okay with any of these four players in this spot, and whatever gets a trade done. So a lot of times my trades that I'm sending out, and I have so many because I'm sending different variations in case one resonates with somebody, where it's not always cut and dry. This person's better, so they're going to want that player. There's a
right.
lot of other pieces that go into it. But I think in general, though, I think it's my most, yeah, it's my favorite part of fantasy football is just wheeling and dealing and trading, and it creates more interaction.
Yeah.
I I feel that above anything else in fantasy football, trades is the gateway to that connection, and making new friends in that community itself, because that's where that conversation happens. Which is also why I get frustrated when people don't respond at all to trades, because I'm half the reason I'm interested in trading is to start the conversation and just connect, and that's why I play fantasy football.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a relationship building tactic. Now I will Yeah, I love that. And it's a relationship building tactic. Now I will say that it does rub some people the wrong way for sure. We've definitely see it backfire in the past when we've gone about it. But I give you all kinds of kudos because there's a few different types of traders that I've seen working out there, and I used to think Arlen was like the quintessential test trader. He's someone that like sends out if you're new to the league or he's never played fantasy football with you, he's going to send you a bunch of different trades to figure out the type of person you are and how you value people, and it helps him create some magical algorithm in the back of his head for how he's going to create a trade that actually works between you and him. So I don't know if that's what's actually happening or if I'm giving him too
It
much
kind of
credit,
is.
but
No, it is. I know what people like. And I wouldn't say, I'm going to say weaknesses, but it's not really. I know people's flavors. Like I know that you're a little bit of a homer, and it won't completely dictate you. But when you're fixated on someone, then you can get a deal done.
yeah. Yeah, there have definitely been times where if I don't keep the cards close to the chest, you can take advantage of me in a trade forum, for sure. Willing to
What do you
admit
consider
that. I
yourself?
think about it when I take a look at trades and what how I approach it. I'm really looking at my team and analyzing: do I really need to trade today to make my team better, or am I trading just to trade? Because I think um, a lot of times I just trade just to trade, and that's when I get myself
Mm-hmm.
in trouble, right? So, really analyzing my team in that same 3 year cycle that I've talked about in the past, especially in Dynasty, when I think through like, okay, I'm only going to make trades that are to keep my team feasible over the next 3 years. I might lose today if I believe on the
Mm-hmm.
upside of what I'm getting for a year from now, right? And that's okay with me. And that has bit me in the butt a couple of times, i.e., trading away CD Lamb and Waddle to get Bijan. There were other pieces. We don't have to get into the weeds of that, but I definitely I think we can agree. I performed a trade to gain Bijan and gave up
Mm-hmm.
30% of face value to go get him.
Yeah,
Right. I think that's what we kind of landed on, and that still
I think
caused me
that's
to.
I think that's normal though. Like there's
Right.
those superstars that get to a certain point where you're trying to buy them before they hit that
Yeah.
that mark. I was going after Garrett Wilson really hard last year. Uh, I think that he might have gotten to that superstar point if had Aaron Rodgers stayed, but you're trying to get it before it happens. Waddle is a really good example this year of
Mhm.
he might hit that next superstar level and you can't buy him. And then once they're there and there's that much excitement, if you're buying in the prime, you're going to pay a 30% premium and you're going to pay sometimes more than that. And it's sometimes it's too rich and sometimes let's go, let's do it because some of that, some of the people you're trading away, you feel like they're already in that premium and they're about to drop off.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear that out there, listeners? As someone that is a Waddle owner, I
Yeah.
would like to announce that if you have a trade sitting in there today that comes at face value, you may want to take a look at this because he's going to pop off. Write it down. Arlen said it. Um, so I want to call that out. Now, when you're taking a look at trades and with as many people as you've interacted with, what are some of the most
Mhm.
interesting types of personalities you've run into as far as like the style of trading you've seen that's not like your own?
Well, I don't know if I would say interesting. What I would say is some of the more common ones that I've run into are, I would say, people that wait too long. I have a friend of mine in another league, and it's not Dynasty, but they wait far too long to
Yeah,
make moves. And if you are trading away known, then and trading for known, then you're not going. I don't think you're going to win in fantasy football because drafting, trading, waivers, everything is about like a calculated risk.
right,
And if you're able to set your team up to be a calculated risk and shoot for the moon, you'll be able to get to the championship more often. But if you are just keeping your team competitive, that those are the teams that kind of get stuck in the middle of the league. They
right.
want to know all the information, they want to be safe about everything, and they don't take
Yep,
enough risks. And then yeah, maybe you get to the playoffs every other year, but you're not going to have enough firepower to get the over the edge there to be a championship contender. So I think those ones are the ones I see a lot as people who are just a little bit cautious, a little too cautious. The other piece is I think there are just like there's a lot of jokes about how bad my trades are, and I think this kind of leads into the next point that we'll talk to after this is like the trade calculators themselves. We can hit on
yeah,
after this, but I mean I don't think it's anybody's fault for sending a
right.
crap trade if somebody accepts it. That's on them to accept or not. This kind of touches on the veto piece too,
Yeah, we'll
but
get yeah,
but I feel that like trade calculators kind of help balance that too for myself,
right.
and I think that when people are sending trades that are really aggressively horrible, that's and that's the interesting one in our league where I can think of a couple people who send some really rough ones where I don't know how they got there,
Right.
and that's when you can use tools to help check yourself before you send it to at least make
Yeah,
sure that it's
not crazy.
relatively fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've taken a look at it and I think about the people that do that, and I can think of a couple folks in our league and other people I've interacted with. But you got the people that try to justify it, right? Like they'll send you a trade, and either before or right after they send it to you, you get this like 3-page dissertation of a text explaining why it makes sense, right?
I do that. I don't
Yours
get
come
that
in
long.
more like in 3 sentence short statements at a time, and then you're kind of waiting to see what I think. But there's people that will send me a 3-page dissertation before I even like have tested the waters on a trade or had a chance to review it, because I know, and that's when I know like, okay, this is obviously going to be
This is gonna be
lopsided.
bad.
Yeah, this is going to be rough.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's good is, and that starts that conversation is what I like to do is I think sometimes I do that, but I think most of the time I'm I'm explaining my angle, like where
Mhm.
why this makes sense for both.
Yeah,
It's I mean obviously in anything in any negotiation it's like a little bit of a sales pitch of like this is why it's great, but if you can at least explain like hey, look, I noticed you're a little light on tight end. I have a couple tight end like
yeah,
spots, or you have a good tight end but older, or a running back situation, and you find the people who have needs on uh, their roster, and then see if there's something they're strong at that you have. You're gonna
yeah,
end up having usually a pretty good conversation if they're somebody who participates a lot in that. I think that if you pick exactly who you want, uh, and then just say, "Oh, okay, value, I'll send you this." I mean, I did that this year, and I knew I was doing it. And I knew it was like not going to work, but I was trying to get Nico Collins, and then it was like a week and a half after Diggs goes there, and I was offering Tank, and it like those were the players that in there. You're going to end up with Diggs and Tank. Actually, it wasn't for Nico, so he would have ended up with Diggs, Tank, and Nico. There's no way. It doesn't matter how great my trade is. There's no way that that's good for that team. Why am I even
Right.
sending this? And those are the type of
Right.
trades
Right.
you want to try to avoid.
Yeah, for sure. Totally get that. Now, sometimes what we do when we're thinking through these types of trades and we're taking these approaches, we have to incorporate picks to try to sweeten the deal or maybe
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
better our position. So, how do you take a look at picks um, in terms of including them in these trades?
I think that's a really important topic for right now as people are in their rookie drafts or approaching them. I look at them a little bit differently depending on the time of the year, and I think most people do. I am really in the market to buy trades once camp is underway, August time throughout the year. I'm trying to buy picks for the future. And
Hmm.
because they're so much cheaper than right before the draft itself, because then I'll sell them right before the draft and gain a little bit
Right.
of value. Now, in terms of the rounds, I think this is a really unique year where I'm trying to buy third rounders. I would love to have some players that I see are dropping there that I would love to take a shot at. In terms of really who I think would have success, you're going to get people first round to beginning of second that are really worth it this year. Most years, I feel like you have after the first three picks, you've it's almost like that's included with the beginning of the second, the rest of it. And after the second round, late second and third, I don't like it doesn't change a trade at all when it's added to it for me.
Hmm.
I don't see the value in it because once you get to second and third round, especially third and fourth, you've got like a 10%, 15% hit rate on most positions.
Yeah. So, taking a look at where these picks are happening, I totally buy into that because when you're looking at the fourth and the fifth round, like you said, not everyone's going to be a Puka Nakua and do that much research or just
Yeah.
randomly fall in love with a guy. Full transparently, I just randomly fell in love with Puka Nakua as a player last
And
year,
as a
and I just
Pacific
lucked
Islander,
in.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of that, a little bit of that
Yeah.
island pride, coconut
Mm-hmm.
pride there.
Nothing wrong with it.
And I got really angry that I missed out on him because I had him a little bit further back, but no one has that kind of love for the players back there, right? Like that's just not what's gonna because you have that 15% hit rate.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it's interesting because I have met some players that or met some fantasy football players that really like those picks and will like lump them
Mm-hmm.
into my trades and they want like all my fourth and fifth rounders and I'm like, okay, where are we valuing these guys at?
Yeah.
Let me go ahead
Sure.
and just see what kind of player I can get back. But when I take a look at the picks, I really it really depends on my needs at that time, right? So if I'm looking at those first and second rounders that I have, there's some years where I'm gonna not be willing to trade them away for almost anything because my team is getting super
Mm-hmm.
old, right? And so I need to value those picks unless I'm getting return really early. If I can switch out a early first rounder for two second rounders or a late first rounder and a second rounder, maybe I do that. Um, but if my team is trending really young, like I think I shared a couple weeks ago, if my team's trending really young, I might be trading those away for players pretty easily. And so it just kind of depends on where we are as far as our team stacks up and our roster construction stands up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like what you're sharing too about the seasonality of trades and just that's what I love about dynasties that we get to play all year long as people can stay engaged. And
You
if you
can
can
build
find those
something over
people,
such a long time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you can find people that are going to stay engaged in the league throughout the year, because I know some people just turn off all their notifications right after the season ends, and then don't turn them back on
Yeah.
till
And
right before the draft. But if you can find those
I
folks, it makes the
also,
league just
you
that
can
much more
see in
fun.
my roster and what picks I have. I don't have any picks after this year, so I often trade away all of them, and I'll try to predict who's the the weakest team and I'll buy their first round pick. And for two
Mm,
years or 1 year, I was able to predict. One, I gave up some stuff for it because I was a little bit off on it. But I think that's a big piece too, because I almost won't trade the 101 for anything for the most part. I did with you, but for the most part, really, like that's unless I'm getting a haul, that player just has so much value usually. Where I
yeah,
will trade multiple just to move up a little bit. I think that I'm buying percentage chance at that point. So if I have two first rounders and I feel like I'm after a tier break, combining those and moving up is almost more likely to hit than two that are like a back into the first and that, or a second and a first. I'd like to buy the percentage chance that this works out. And this is not a bust. So that's a
yeah.
big piece to it. And shout out to you because it was mid or right after our trade that or right after the draft last year, and I drafted Puka after you drafted Sean Tucker, and I really like Sean Tucker, and I didn't know much about Puka. I think I drafted him because it was Puka shell necklace was in my head, and I was like, that's cool. I'm drafting a nickname. I was not prepared, and you jumped in and you had a feeling for this guy, and it worked out, and that was that bet that you took that ended up, even though I drafted him almost around later, it ended up working out for you. You saw right away, like, okay, I'm gonna shoot my shot on this guy. What do you think about when a trade is lopsided? When we have vetoes on here, whew, that is a hot button issue that I've had some arguments over about my view on how vetoes should be traded. What do you think?
To have you repeat the last 30 seconds because you were completely frozen. I didn't hear any of that.
Weird. I hope this episode's good. Uh, the the veto uh, vetoes themselves, making sure that I guess I have different views than most or than a lot of people on vetoes. I think that there's two camps. There's a camp that says, hey, veto to keep a trade balanced, veto for collusion, and then define collusion for me, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
the people who feel that way. I feel almost in no situation other than true collusion you should have a veto happen. I think that because there's too much we don't know, and that people have the right to
Yeah.
make bad choices as well. And at the end of the day, the if you're vetoing a trade, your indicator that it's okay to veto should be: are you considering kicking those people out of the league? Because I feel that if they're doing something, they have to do something pretty bad and collude to be able to get a trade just canceled.
Yeah, so what I put down is that, like, for me, the veto button is an almost never, as long as it's about the game and about the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the handshake deals that happen outside of it. So many people play in like 10 leagues or something, and there's multiple people like you and I play in two or three leagues together, maybe four leagues together on a year where we're testing some stuff out. Like, I
Yeah.
don't like we don't do it, but I've seen things where like, oh, I'll do this trade for you in this league if you do this trade for me in another. So stuff like that can get really, really sketchy. I think one
Yeah,
thing
I
that
think that's a
we've
no
set
go.
up, yeah, that's a for sure a no go. But one thing that I think we've set up pretty well, not to toot our own horn, but like we've kind of created a commissioner committee. There's three of us that are involved, and so whenever trades go down, if we have a question about it, we can try to discuss it before we bring it to the rest of the group, right? And like I said before, we haven't had to do that yet. I don't think with the for veto purposes. Now we've had other situations where people aren't setting the lineups and doing stuff like that. And it's really nice to have that commissioner committee to be able to have that discussion before we bring it to the greater group.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that veto button, like, I don't think we should be doing it just to like say that that trade isn't fair. Like if someone's being dumb and someone's able to take advantage of it, or if someone was just misreading or believes too much in a player, like that's not on me if they really, really like a player. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with those types of trades going through. And if, I'm the one that looked out from it, great. If I have to watch it happen in front of me, which I've seen several times um, from people in our league, and I have to let them go, we have to let them go. But yeah, as long as it's about the game and about our specific league, I don't see any reason to use that veto button.
Yeah, I mean, let's say I had traded you.
Now,
Let's say I trade you Garrett Wilson for Puka Nakua last year before the season. That would get vetoed in a lot of situations, but I
yeah,
would maybe like Puka is the winner. Like whoever gets Puka is the winner of that one. There's just too many extreme example to highlight the point that we just don't know anyways. So I don't think it's the commissioner or the league's decision to dictate what's fair or not and make any decisions based off of that. Plus, it slows it down a little bit.
Yeah, and I especially don't like those leagues where there's like a majority rules voting process. Like you, if enough people say veto, it just vetoes it. Like
It's like a
that,
gross because then you start campaigning and people start like
right?
we had that in a league, and taking that out of it was the one of the best decisions I felt. But we did it in the wrong way. I feel there's a happy place. There's a you say accept on a trade, and it processes immediately, and then that caused a lot of like, well, what a second, wait a second, like what's going on here, and a lot of bad feelings. I think the going to the commissioners to hit process or reject is a solid, like as long as there's a solid rule there that hey, it's going to get approved. It's just in case, so we have a second to take a look at it, just in case anybody throws up their arms. But either way, that pause there before it's processed, I think is like a nice happy middle ground to please everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And that must be why we work so well together as a part of the commissioner committee.
There you go.
Um, Now, we talked a little bit about trade calculators. I don't know if we want to revisit this, but what are your like? How do you utilize that?
Trade calculators. So I definitely one like keep trade cut, like that's the most popular one. There's dynastycalculator.com. I think that's another one. They what I like to do with trade calculators is to check myself before I send stuff to make sure that it's close. I will accept trades that say I'm losing, and people should accept ones that say they're losing as well. If you feel like it's because it doesn't take into account your team, it doesn't take into account your league structure. Like we have 4 flex, so a lot of times keep trade cut will add a lot of value on because you're getting the best player, but maybe your team is depleted and you have 4 flex spots plus the other positions to fill. Then
Yeah,
yeah, at this point maybe it's best to take that trade that you're technically losing in after that adjustment score is put in. So I think that it's helpful to keep a guide and to just check your gut, but I don't think it should be the guide, and it should not be the answer to if a trade is good or not. I think there's too many variables that doesn't take into account.
yeah, yeah. In our league, we've got 9 spots that you have to fill with either wide receivers, running backs, or tight ends, and just figuring that out in any given time is insane to think about. For me,
Yeah.
it's a tool, and I think it can be used as a tiebreaker if I've got a couple of different options in mind, right? But it's definitely not the authority, right? It's a tool to be used, not an authority to make a decision from. Clean and simple as that for those people that live and die by their trade calculators.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, and I mean, when you're making it sucks when you put something together and you are sending it to someone and you felt like, wow, this is great for both of us. Like this
Hmm.
puts this balance on our team's weakness and strengths, and like I can help you, you can help me, and both teams are because there's not always a winner and a loser. Both teams in the moment of are making good decisions for their teams, and then the trade calculator comes in, and it's really not taking into account like so many different aspects of our teams
Right.
that in win now mode versus in the future, all these different pieces. And if somebody's like they're harping on the trade calculator too much, it can really take away from well their own team. I think it only hurts if you use that as a gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think we've gone back and forth on trades a ton here. Are we missing
Yeah,
anything, or are we ready to talk about something else?
I think we hit everything. I think we're good. The next piece I really wanted to dive into is positional approach. Now, here we're going to be talking about the positional approach. How do you look at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end? How do you look at fullback if you're if you're dirty? Uh, how do you look at each position? And we'll have like a blanket approach of like, what do you like to build your team around? Uh, how do you treat them differently in trades and drafts? How do you look at each one? So when it comes to what you want to build your team around, Nate, what position are you going after in? And we are in one quarterback dynasty. Obviously, this would tweak a little bit with a lot of it with Superflex, but one quarterback dynasty, four flex. What's your move?
So here's the deal. First off, I want to call out, I noticed that in our little graphic there and in our discussion and in our league, we've been missing on kickers. And I just want to say that, like,
Can I? Yeah, can I start with
I
that?
can we like petition? Like, I don't like
No.
kickers, long snappers, punters. There's so much like juice to be squeezed from the possibilities here that we're missing out on. And I think our leagues would be so much fun, but that sounds like another day
A punter
that we need to
only
discuss all that.
league.
Well, yeah, punter only league, right? Like, dude,
Hmm.
net yards, like it. There's all kinds of nerdy
There's so many
analytics we can get into with
possibilities.
these, right? No, but seriously, so it's weird what the shift has done, especially in redraft leagues and how how that changes when you look at a dynasty league. But with four flexes in our league, right, we have to look at the most guaranteed points as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and the most consistent, right? So I'm looking for two things. I try to find as many pass catching running backs as possible and or wide receivers, right? So I stay away from, and in most PPR leagues you can make that same argument, but that's who I'm building around, and I'm okay with up until recently, and I'm trying not to contradict myself from our last pod, but traditionally I'm willing to punt on tight end, and even take like a flyer on a quarterback as long as I can get the points um, from consistency at wide receiver and pass catching backs.
Right. I'm in the same
And
boat.
then when
I
we
think
eventually add kickers back in there.
yeah, of course. Super kicker flex. Uh, so I agree with you. I think in general, I if I can't get the top ones, I really have to focus on others. But the position that I usually punt is running back, and it's not that I don't want a strong running back, but I'm okay with leasing running backs and owning wide receivers. Like that approach where I'm going to have this wide receiver for years and years and years and invest in them and stack up as many as possible. And running backs, I can buy an old one and just use them for a couple of years, or use somebody entering their prime and sell them right away. My plan this whole time with Kyron, and it's damaged a bit now, but was to use them for this year and then trade him away at the off season next year. And the reason is there's such a small shelf life for a running back impacting your team. And there's something great about having those powerful running backs. But if you wait too long, unless you're just making a full on run, if you wait too long, then you're stuck holding the bag. You're stuck with these players that are really hard to get off of your team, and they crash really fast. And there's a lot of predictable metrics about age and type and when they're going to lose value with every position. So it's good to get rid of them almost before their second contract, like the last year when they're entering their last year of their first contract. It's almost a great time then to just say, I can find somebody else. I'll move you on from you while you're at peak value.
Yeah. And how does that change your approach during the draft? Like when you're thinking about drafting a running back, like where are you grabbing running backs in the draft, knowing that you're trying to tilt young, um, right, and try to keep running backs
Hmm.
on your team during their first contract?
Yeah, like this year, I would love Brooks or Benson. If one of those fell to me at 201, depending on what's left, I would consider taking them there. I'm not married to either, but I feel that when there's a solid running back I, running backs are one of the easier positions to predict if they're going to be good. When it
Yeah.
comes down to once they're already on the team, you already know what's going on by the time you're drafting in your rookie draft. It's pretty easy to hit. So like the hit rate's so much higher that I would love a young rookie running back that is solid. And then and once you get to the backup areas, like it's so unpredictable there. So if you have a starter, you feel like they have a really good shot at owning that backfield and they're young, then yeah, you got 3 or 4 years with them. before you need to cash out. So I love that idea. I love being able to grab them earlier in their careers.
Nice. Yeah. And then I try to find people like you that are willing to trade them to me early enough in their careers that I'll still get a couple years out of them. That way I can spend my draft capital on wide receivers and other folks. Just kidding. Um, but but as we jump into this, yeah, thinking about what's out there, I agree with you with as far as the running back position goes. I haven't felt, to be honest and transparent, I haven't quite figured out what that right algorithm is in a dynasty league.
Yeah.
Right, it's hard to dictate. I mean, I'm sitting pretty nicely with Bijan and ETN in 1 and 2 for me.
Hmm.
So I feel like I can sit them there at least another year or so and just focus on everything else. Every flex position, I try to be a wide receiver.
And I'm very much different. Like I'm leaning slightly away from running backs lately in regular leagues, but in general, I still do go very hard after running backs in a
Yeah,
redraft format. It's really here where it, and only because of those things mentioned, but then you do get, and there is a truth to you have to have solid running backs in order to
yeah,
win a championship. It's off balance a
right,
little bit within our league because we have 4 flex, which I really like because it allows a few different ways to become a championship team. More people in the league can, if they have a huge weakness, they can be have an overabundance in something and still make it. So I like the format, but that gives us a little bit more leeway to only have 1 or 2 solid ones and then some
yeah,
mediocre running backs. Like I have Achan and Kyron, and then after that I've got like Warren and Miller, and those aren't going to carry me. If I have to put them in, I will. They probably won't break into my flex, but
hmm,
somebody's going to get hurt. Both of them
yep,
got hurt last year, so I'm going to be playing them at some point as backups, other than just the bye weeks themselves. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm still trying to find the right balance and what's an acceptable amount of depth at running back in
yeah.
order to be successful throughout the year.
Yeah, I like the hero running back strategy of having like one that you know that's going to lock and give you a bunch of points, and then
Yeah,
you
sure.
play around with everything else. But I totally, if we end up going, if anyone in our league goes like the zero running back style and just like goes week to week, the hard thing about a league as deep as ours, like I don't know if this is traditional within dynasty leagues, but not only do we have 4 flex positions, but our benches are super deep.
We do have a
So the
larger, yeah.
Yeah, so the waiver, when you don't have a waiver wire to play with, and you're gonna have to rely on trades, and I feel like the trade lever and you set up our league this way. Um, but once you have someone that's hurt and you don't have anyone backing them up, you're gonna have to rely on trades to rebuild your team or get someone to play. And I think that's where folks are able to take advantage of stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I do want to pause for a second and speak to for our superflex listeners that I think this is something I think that we need to get into ourselves. Let's just start one just so we can understand it more. So you can say I'm completely wrong, but the initial feeling I have with superflex is that there's too much of a premium on quarterbacks. Obviously, understand why. I absolutely understand how important they are. But when it goes past that like second, third tier of quarterbacks, I feel like there's just too much weight given to them where they're in, especially in drafts, you're taking some quarterbacks far and away over like solid wide receivers. I think Odunze is at the top of the draft is an example of where it's neighbors then a couple other quarterbacks like then it's Odunze. And I feel like if I was in there, I would probably either fail or be really successful on this one. But I think I would take a little bit of the pressure off of getting that third or fourth quarterback uh, being such a solid starter when I know I can have this great person that's going to start and be successful in this wide receiver position and last for just as long.
yeah, I can see that. And Superflex is a lot of fun because as a someone watching football every Sunday or on Monday, you want to, the quarterback's going to have the ball in their hand the most. So you want those players to count more for your points so you can enjoy watching those games more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just adds a level of just fun to the game. Um, but yeah, there's a huge level of complexity there because you're relying on folks like last year. A lot of people were playing Zach Wilson in their second quarterback spot. Like
Hmm.
it's one of those things where like, man, I have no choice here. And with the 12 team league, you're playing a super flex league. You've got 24 quarterbacks that have got to start. Um, you're right. I think that's when you start to lean away from those players and you start putting in your wide receivers. You start putting in your folks in that second position anyway, um, because you're hoping for them to do more. But the reality
Yeah.
is that second quarterback's going to get you 12 points or 7 points or throw 3 interceptions. They'll
Yeah.
pull a Nathan Peterman on you against the Chargers and throw 5 interceptions in the first half.
Yeah. I
That
want
was
to
a 6 year callback, by the way.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, why that was
I
relevant.
no, I really like it. Like in trades with so quarterbacks, I don't. The tough part about one quarterback is no matter how great they are, they don't hold much value. And
Right.
uh, even Josh Allen, I mean, got a ton of value in Dynasty, obviously, but there's not like what he should. I feel like when it comes to a trade where I've offered stuff with him in it, and I would be drooling, and I was drooling when you sent me an offer that included Allen. I was like, yes, take my money. Like, I think that top guy is so important. In terms of the other positions, like wide receiver is really hard to trade for within Dynasty. Running back is one of my favorites to like. It's one of the only positions I'll get when they're super old. Is a running back who's still like a Mostert who's still doing it because you're gonna ride them into the ground, but they're cheap. A wide receiver you can make a story for. A quarterback you can make a story for. Same thing with tight end for so many years past when you really should have them on your team that you're still paying a premium when they're good, and running backs when they're good but a little older, you get such a larger discount. So when it comes to trades, I really like grabbing those older running backs. If I if I'm in a position to fill that because I approach it with a lighter running back room, then I'm going to need to get some of those old guys, and I think that's why I'm okay with being a little lighter and desperate at times for that position.
Yeah, that makes sense. Derrick Henry constantly breaking that mold, but for sure.
I know every single year, and but his value for years has not been very high. Still, that's almost one of the he breaks it. He keeps going. He keeps going. I mean, Mostert is a better example, even of like, should we trade for him again this year? Is this the last year or? But you're not going to have to pay much at all. Like if you have him, you're probably not trading him away because you're not going to get anything. But if you're in a position where you're not going to start him, cash out now. So there's this weird relationship, I think, with that older one to get a little sneaky value
Yeah,
within
for
fantasy
sure.
football.
Absolutely.
All right, so if you had to remove one position of the ones that we have in our dynasty league of the normal positions, skill positions, if you had to remove one from fantasy football, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a fun one. Um, I would remove the positional lock from tight end, meaning I would add a fifth flex that can use tight ends in, because of the amount of variability that there is with that position and like the tight ends that are actually out there. There are teams in the NFL today that have tight ends in their roster that will catch maybe 5% of the passes of a tight end the starting number one tight end will catch 5% of the passes that a tight end on like Sam Laporta will get because they're mainly out there for blocking. They're mainly out there as a sixth lineman or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
the variability of that position makes it crazy that we have to play one of these folks in the league,
Sure.
right? So I'm not saying we punt tight end like we've punted kicker, which I still want to fight you over. Um,
They
but
shouldn't
uh,
even be in regular football, by the way.
but they're there. Right.
But they
Why are you
shouldn't be.
removing their
That's not
identity?
a
They're
football
an
skill.
offensive player position, right? It's an
They
offensive player position that's out there. Uh, we're discrediting their existence. But all that aside, tight ends, they're out there. They have value, and they should be an option to play. But I like it more as a fifth flex option, and then maybe we add this is, and I haven't thought this out at all, but maybe if they're not being required to play, that's when you do things like a tight end premium that will force people to actually use tight ends in the league.
Yeah, that's true. This is something we considered with our league when we were first putting it up, but for me, it would be to add kickers back in so that I can kick them out again. So I don't think that they should be in football as a sport, let alone fantasy. They don't add anything to the game, and I feel like kickers only make the game worse. I know it's I know people love kickers. It's not a football skill, kicking a ball. I'm a huge MLS fan, big Timbers fan. So I'm not. This is not a football guy going. Oh, it's not a but it's not a football skill. It's a soccer skill. That's why a lot of them are soccer players. Like,
Hmm.
and then they convert over to this, right? So I think that we're already kind of dumbing down the kickoff, which I actually like the rule changes for this year, but
Yeah.
just just give them the ball instead of a kickoff and have them start where they usually start anyways. Why are we kicking for an extra point? Just don't have the extra point, or go for a 2 point conversion every time and not have a kicking option. Punting, just go for a fourth, like go go for a Hail Mary. If you don't end up getting it, look, you didn't get a first down and you turned the ball over. That's your fault. And now the team is there wherever you messed up, and that's where they get the ball. I think that I think I don't know why it was ever added to football. I think there's no need at all.
All
That's
right.
my and especially in fantasy football when it was so random anyways, where it's hard to really get a really a gauge on conditions and predictability of that position over most others. I think that it's just get him out of here. It doesn't add anything to anybody. But but Tucker has a great voice, so he's an opera singer and he would still do great, even if there was no football.
You're sitting there like, so go figure out what your other trades are. You
Go
have
figure out whatever
talent,
you're good at,
obviously,
because
right? Your
yeah, you're
talent
really
as a
good at
kicker
stuff.
is useless. Go do something else with your life.
Yeah, and I would
Wow.
just I mean, offer him a severance and just do a little bit of positional downsizing. We did it with fullbacks and nobody cared. Let's do let's do it with kickers. All right, that's my rant. That's my rant. I think that's where we can end it for. That's where we can end it for today. Anything you want to hit on before we close out?
I don't know that I can do better than kickers. So, than the aggression that you have towards kickers. I don't know what's stronger, my love for them or your pure, unadulterated hatred towards them. Um, and
For the record, it's not hatred. It's just boredom.
okay,
Boredom. And I just
fair
don't
enough.
like process efficiency. I don't like redundant, unnecessary tasks. And that's what a kicker is. All right, I won't go back into it. But we really appreciate y'all for tuning in and listening. This is just fun for us to have a conversation and start the conversation with y'all. So if there's some hot button issues, if you agree with me as kickers, let me know. But if there's some hot button issues, some things that you disagree or agree with us, let us know down below. And obviously like, subscribe, and all of that. It really does help us out, and it motivates us every week to come back and give you another episode. So I appreciate everybody, and we will catch you around the next time.